20,000 youth through speaking, coaching, and mentoring. He has inspired us for years. Welcome to EMIY Podcast with your host, Calvin T. Mann, the Encourager.
Good evening. Today, EMIY, we're going to get into some new things, some new looks, some new laws, some information for your parents. And again, once again, some solutions. We're going to have a little bit of a discussion. There's a lot going on. I am really going to start this conversation about acceptable behavior and culture and unacceptable behavior and culture. The one thing I recognize moving back into the city, I recognize right away there's tons of lawlessness, right? It's everywhere, and of course, I'm going to direct it toward healthy fatherhood. When the fathers are healthy, a lot of things happen. A lot of good things happen for the children, and so we're gonna have this discussion in the building today. Of course, Heather Miller sitting right next to me, and Dave Patterson, right? And we're gonna get knee deep into this conversation. More importantly, I'm gonna give you a little story about lawlessness. One at which really has taken a lot of lives, right? I mean, we talked about this, right? So, Heather, a lot of times we don't like solutions. We like to blame. We like to put the blame in many places, right? And one of the conversations I had last week was the brother was, with so much information thrown, the brother had to say to me, he says, so you don't think that, right, racism play a part? I said, if I have to navigate racism and say racism play a part, basically, I done gave up, right? Because we understand that we are already dealing with a racist environment, racism is real, racist policies, all of that, right? But what about the things that we can control? Right? Here's some things we can't control. Non-participation in certain laws, right? One of which, as I was explaining, 41 million children are in the child support system, right? So that's law. That's your laws, right? You got to honor these laws, right? And so we go after, people who don't honor the child support system, men and women who don't honor the child support system. And then you go to the community and you see cars everywhere, right? We running red lights. We don't stop for red lights. People dying, getting killed, right? Because you decided you just was going to blow through this stop sign. We're going to go down the street at 100 miles an hour and we're going to blow through this stop sign, and we going to, right, regardless to the thought, we don't care nothing about that. Right, so that goes back into the mentality, acceptable behavior, the lawlessness, right? So we often see they got to put bumpers in the streets to slow you down, right? And I'm going, where is this at, right? As you're driving through, I'm driving through Oakland County, and I'm going, where is this at out here, right? So this was something that was developed outside of racism, right? That from culture, acceptable behavior, something that you're doing, or I'm doing, that we decided that we had to put up bumpers in the street to slow down the street. Because, again, as I said 2 weeks ago, we've been killing kids. We got to stop acting like that hasn't been the norm in the inner city across America, right? That's a norm. It's a normal statistic, right? So we've been killing kids. So a lot of times we don't like to really look at ourselves, right? We always like to say they, right? We look at they. But here's something that I noticed, and Heather, you can put this on the books, right? I'm going to put this on the books. Who's teaching law in DPS? Because I had law When I hit the 9th grade, I had law at Ferndale, right, high school. So I had law. I was taught law. But why are you being taught law? And why are you being denied law? Think about that. Why you don't have law as a class? That was an elective for me. I had to have law to graduate from high school, right? We had laws. You couldn't miss. Only 6 tardies was an absence. You couldn't have 6 absence in a school year or you failed that class. DPS, you can have 40 absences and still get a grade. These are the things that I've seen personally, right? Where you miss school. Truancy is a big issue. Truancy is also a trainer that allows you, when you become an adult, you always make those same excuses not to be at work. Truancy is real, right? Being consistent is real. Oh, I don't feel like today, I got a headache, so I'm going to take the day off. That's the training. Well, see, I couldn't afford that, right? I had to be at school. So me being at school was a lot going on when I went to high school, right? So, I come out of Higginbotham, Bobium, and Pastor. I went to all them schools. Every day I had to fight. I guess that was the law or the acceptable behavior, as we'll get into, right? Because you got to fight to go to school. That's the dumbest shit in the world to me, you see? But you got to fight to go to school to get the education. And of course, again, so we're going to say they, right? So we're going to get into this they, right? But I'm going to talk about we, right? Here are some things that really is astonishing. When we were talking today, I said it's funny that many bikes, motor vehicles, all motor vehicles have laws. You have to honor those laws. Mini bikes and all of that. So if you get pulled over by the police, you don't have a license to that mini bike, the whole 9, they impound it, and you still talking about what the police then did, what about your part? That's another thing where we ignore laws, right? Stop sign, little girl. Let's think about this. Everybody likes to praise people who speak well and do things, right? But I remember years ago, former mayor, lights was out. A little girl was crossing the street. That resonates with me every day. That the lights was out on the street's lights with that little girl and her sister. And that little sister today is out her older sister who protected her, who was hit, right? 1, because lawlessness. 2, because the leadership, the lights was out. See, we like to focus on the ignorance part of this thing, but the lights was out in the city. Kids was going to school where there was no lights. So this little girl lost her life. Lawlessness, right? You see it all the time. I see it. Young man was crossing the street on 7 Mile, older gentleman. Legacy, gone. Somebody ran through, hit him, running a stop sign. They looking for him. Nobody got to turn themselves in. You got people all over billboards right now looking for the murderers of their loved ones for $1,500, $2,500, right? Lawlessness, right? So we're going to get into this acceptable behavior. I just thought I wanted to, bring you in where this story is going, because I think it's important that when we paint these solutions that we must begin to act on these solutions. And not everybody will like, who are you? Who are you? That's how they do it, right? Because respect, right? Respect is watered down. I respect your opinion, Elle. I respect your opinion, Dave. I respect your opinion, Heather, right? But, somebody else, like I was told once before, oh, you didn't graduate from DPS high school, so, I say, hey, my man, I was born in Detroit. I got more Detroit years than you do. You talking about a high school. My high school was wonderful. My mom gave me an opportunity to get an education. She sacrificed. You talking about I'm not smart or good because I didn't go to a DPS school or whatever. Cut that out. That's that ignorant shit, right? So let's really get into this. Heather, accepted culture.
I'd like to start with just framing what that looks like and what that means. And then I also want to touch on three topics. I want to touch on lawlessness and lack of respect. I want to talk on the absence of healthy fathers. I want to talk about the cost of goods and the cost to do good. So those are three things I want to make sure that I have a chance to share. And of course, my perspective is about the deeper meaning of these things. So what does it really mean metaphysically? What does it mean spiritually? And what is it all costing us as individuals, as families, and as community? So I can start with just saying hello to Dave and Book and Calvin and being thankful for being here to share another day, another perspective, and then just having a platform to look a little bit deeper than we tend to look in terms of our issues and in terms of our solutions. So again, my name is Heather Hedharu, and I'm a personal change coach, but I also facilitate trainings and workshops and a new way of thinking, ushering in this season that we're in with a new way of thinking, deeper thoughts that we can make a difference as an individual, and collectively we can change the way that the world looks at us and looks to us. So acceptable and accepted culture really is about the values, norms, behaviors, daily practices of social groups. And that social group could be where you live, where you play, where you worship, where you work, where you build, but it's ultimately where your legacy is being built, where your legacy, what people say about you, what you've done in other people's lives. It is in that place, in that space, that acceptable culture really takes root. I want to talk about how in that legacy and in the examples that we live and we set, we indoctrinate people in acceptable and accepted culture, especially in our families, but you see it more readily or easily in our communities, especially if you live if you live and grow up in areas where the level of acceptable culture makes other people want to leave and not be a part of that. So when you have that mass exodus of families and communities, typically that exit is about the acceptable cultures that exist there that you no longer accept. So when you no longer accept it, you separate yourself from it. And so we've seen that over the years with the city of Detroit. We're down to around 600,000 people, as opposed to the 2 million people who have been here, consistently over the boom of the city, the growth of the city. So what happened? What happened in this mass exodus of millions of families that left the community because they no longer were accepting the culture that was acceptable to the masses in those places, in that space.
Right.
So I want to kind of start off with that. I also want to talk about how acceptable culture is actually taught and learned behavior. That's taught through our expectations. It's through the things that you witness, that you see every day. It's those accounts and events that leave an indelible mark on your thoughts, in your psyche, in your spirit. All of those things are a part of this understanding of acceptable culture. The other dynamic of that is that the people who are a part of that culture, whether they agree or don't agree, you don't typically challenge that culture for fear of being isolated, segregated, or separated and no longer belonging to your peer group or that social group. And so when people typically don't try to make their voices heard or engage in behaviors that help to shift that culture, we kind of go silent. And you've seen that also. That happened a lot with our elders. Elders used to sit out on their porches. Elders used to say hi. Elders used to give you a peppermint. Elders used to be a part of what a block looked like. Now they're sitting in their house as opposed to on a porch for fear that the cars that are flying down the street, that the people and the marijuana smoking, the all of these new dynamics that have now become acceptable because they have been unchallenged by those who are in those environments, in those spaces, for fear.
Yep,
Now,
they're
whatever that
unprotected.
fear,
Yeah.
whatever that fear might be,
Yes.
it is a part of the challenge. So I'll yield to Dave to weigh in here, and then I'll get back to some of the deeper meanings of those things.
Yeah, hey guys, how you guys doing? Yeah, you hit a lot of key points, and unfortunately, uh, ignorance always puts us behind the curve, and a great deal of what we see with central family culture and behavior and identity is because we lack identity. If you don't express or teach things that give you an identity into your culture in an appropriate way, then obviously what goes in will come out. So you'll see inappropriate behavior. And what we're seeing is an outward manifestation of what is inside people today. So you got, as you mentioned, Cal, about having the roadblocks in the middle of a side street or just a general street where, the housing is at. How does that happen? Well, because we see change in behavior. Heather, you mentioned that there was a time when the cultural norms were that the elders would pass down their knowledge and wisdom and teach certain behaviors and manners and moral principles that would spill forward to the next generation. But because now the generations have gotten so diluted, and one of the problems that exists with this acceptable behavior is that every generation likes to make the next generation better. But sometimes you can give people too much candy. So you let a kid in the candy shop and say, run at it. Well, obviously, there's going to be some sickness to come out of that. And what we have allowed through all the giving in our culture to try to identify with other cultures through assimilation, we have compromised our standards. So now we see a sick outcome of young people now moving into young adulthood and older adulthood because they never took care of the illness that was inside of them. So all this outward manifestation that we're seeing in behavior that's compromising various cultures, and it's not just the African American culture, it's across the board. I mean, I lived in Asian countries, and there was a very rigid format of their culture. That's different from the race, the outward appearance. We're talking about values, moral principles, the way we behave. That's when we move into our cultural norm. That is shifted too, because each generation continues to try to give each generation a little more than what they previously had. That compromise without checks and balance, and we don't have checks and balance. So it's unfortunate when you see, again, there's an illness within the culture, basically. We can get into the racial stuff that, we know that politically they address these things from outward appearance, your skin color, your hair texture, all these different things, and they make an identity. What are you, black? Are you Asian? And this and that. Well, that's all well and good, but our culture has been compromised. The things that we call social norms or acceptable norms within that culture has been changed. And we're not doing anything to put a halt to it. So what happens when you don't address the illness? It continues to spread. And that's what we're seeing.
So, thank you, Dave. Thank you, Heather. So when we really look at it, here's another topic, right, that falls into an area, and I'm going to let Heather touch on that, about fathers, right? Because here's another picture being painted as to how important the in-house father really is, right? How important is the in-house father? So, Heather, you wanted to elaborate on that part of your part two before I jump in on part two.
So I do want to just take a step back for a moment and talk about lawlessness as it relates to respect. somewhere we lost the connection to what law we're really following. What is your grounding? Where is your spiritual base? Because if you are following your spiritual processes, your spiritual grounding, your spiritual values, if you are truly following and walking that path, man's law is already taken into subjection. So that means we're above that law because we have a higher law that we are practicing daily and that we are demonstrating in our words and our thoughts and in our actions. So what's showing up in our words and our thoughts and our action is the separation between this physical walk that we're taking and this spiritual walk. Somewhere we've lost the connection of the thing that pulls it together. And because we don't have the glue that holds it all together, that really binds us, which leads into the family unit. The family has always been the glue that binds your spiritual law and the physical law into one mindset, one culture, one acceptable behavior, one acceptable practice, one acceptable lifestyle. And so since many of our families have been divided, and the thing that was holding us together was often healthy fatherhood. When the father was in the family, there was a lot more cohesiveness in those values. Because if you didn't have the spiritual father that you were submitting to, you had your physical or earthly father that you were submitted to, that you had to learn to garner respect for because of the authority that they have, because of the if nothing else, from the recognition of the role that they played in the family, which was typically to protect and to provide and to guide. And so somewhere we lost, and it's not just somewhere, it's not a random thing. It was a very intentional action over generations to get us where we are right now. We just have bought into it and accepted this new state of being as our acceptable behavior and lifestyle. So I just want to say first, I think it came from the lack of having our spiritual groundedness that we're living and practicing every day in all of the spaces where we occupy. So we've lost that. So we've lost the connection to the law, the spiritual laws. And so now we have to come submission to man's law, which is it's not about justice. Man's law is not about justice. And so that is an expectation that is where justice takes place. And that is not where justice takes place. Justice takes place on the spiritual level, because that's where you run into the laws of karma. That's where you run into the laws of what you sow and reap. Those principles are still in operation. But we don't tend to see that because we don't see the connection between our lawlessness and disrespect and the circumstances of our families. And so as we continue to grow, and hopefully we can wrap up in today's conversation with some tools on how to reconnect in those missing parts. So the lack of family, the lack of healthy fatherhood in our communities, in our lives, is a direct relationship. And this is a universal principle. When you look at universal cosmic law, it is as above, so below. When we've lost the spiritual connection to our father, our spiritual father, whereby we've lost the connection to our physical father. So the first step in restoration is restoring the relationship with our spiritual father, because then you have the submission, you have the respect for the physical father. But the universal cosmic law, the spiritual law that spiritual people fall under, is you reap what you sow. This one is also as above, so below. So that's the law of karma that I mentioned with the reap what you sow, but also this law of as above, so below. And I'm sure most people have heard that before, But this is another way to look at that dynamic. That's a deeper level.
So yes, excellent point. Right, the real dynamic is, and Dave, I'm coming to you. Right, the real dynamic is, in that explanation that you just gave. Right, it is how amazing is when you see the success of people at a extreme level, legacy, the whole nine. Usually, there's fatherhood involved. As in above, then working on yourself, as we talked about last week, working on yourself to get yourself right, to show yourself love, is part of that spiritual connection to the higher power for self to be better, to recognize society has forgotten the gifts that God put in the men. Money has become the God that we only seek. And if we cannot seek God through money and materialism, you really don't have no value when it comes to this society. It's like, where is that value, right? And so to move on, Dave, if you want to add to that, you can, before I get into, the parenting piece.
Yeah, I think Heather hit it on the head in relation to the same with what you just said, Calvin. The spiritual aspect has been compromised. The assimilation. We as people across the board in any culture have assimilated to the ideal of what Satan created an illusion when he tempted Jesus in the wilderness, that I will give you all this, the world, if you will, if you just bow down to me. Well, we have bought into that bill of goods to bow down to uh, the negative side of the spiritual realm, if you will, with Satan and his ideals, that we've lost sight that the true Heavenly Father is the one that provides us all we need. But we have given into that because we want to be accepted, we want to be a part of, we want to be connected. But when you try to connect to man and you disconnect to God, again, now you begin to fall. And that's what we're seeing. This is not something that's not meant to be, because Jesus already said that these things would manifest. But what we have to do, as Heather mentioned, is that we have to help people to recognize the importance of the Heavenly Father, so that we may be able to, as earthly fathers, follow the pattern. That's why he sent Jesus to give us a model, something that we can stand on. He sent Jesus to deliver us, develop us, to move us towards our destiny. And unfortunately, our destiny has been compromised because we're moving towards the destiny of materialism, that worldly God, things, possessions. And unfortunately, these treasures that we're building here on earth will mold and rust. The treasure we should be building is the one in the heavenly places. But this is, again, most people are not dealing with, and I say most, a great deal. If you do the statistics, you will see that 68% don't even believe in God anymore. 68% of the people population don't believe in God anymore. They say they're spiritual, but they really don't connect God to that piece. And there are a lot of reasons why they don't connect, because they look at man's behavior and not recognize that you can't look at man as your model. You have to look at Christ as your model. Well, that's how we, as Christians see it. But other beliefs have their views too. But the bottom line is there's a deeper message here, and it's about a spiritual connection, because we are a spirit housed in a body with a mind, will, and emotion. And if we're not teaching that in the homes, we operate from being a body with a mind, will, and emotion, or a soul that has a spirit, but that spirit becomes kind of micro, if you will, in the way we view our life, the way we conduct ourselves in our lives. Because once you really start operating from the spirit, you start exercising the fruit of the spirit. And those things would bring us a little more closer and connected. And this is something that the father, as the earthly father, has to incorporate into his own conduct, his own mentality, his own mind, will, and emotion, to transfer this information on to the next generation. Right now, that's not happening, because even those who profess to walk spiritually, let's use that so I won't offend anybody else and other spiritual beliefs. But even those who profess that, we really have diluted the meaning of spiritual connection.
Yeah. Yeah, we've taken full advantage right? That right because this is why many people have been attacking religion and going into that's where the confusion come in because greed has placed itself in many pulpits and shown that greed into where their parishioners are in poverty and and push that dynamic. So yes, no question that process has been ongoing and said it would be ongoing, and so we are here. The one piece I want to be clear about, Dave and Heather, is the parenting, right? As we talked about before, right? There's a certain amount of trauma that's taking place between parents, even with parents in a household, right? There's a battle. Men and women who aren't married and have endured, there's still a battle for the man to have a voice around his kids. And it's a constant, battle, except for the particular, the woman who understands how important his voice really is to the family, right? Who we merge well together and we build and, right? Even in co-parenting situations, it takes a certain maturity to get there. And the parenting is the first place that this lawlessness is being created. Is as I was saying, Dave, that and Heather before, you only got a 30% chance success rate, right? A lot of good come out of, right, the dynamic of a single parent or two parent homes, but in the majority of when you get into that majority of what we're seeing, right, that is not a good level for parenting. So as I was saying before, and I really want to really dive into that part, here's some more of that acceptable behavior. Acceptable behavior meaning, I'm going to stay beefing with you and despise you regardless to what it does to the child. You see? Because this is about me. It's not about you, right? I was sharing yesterday as I've been working pretty hard at getting some things together, and I was sharing that I am the first kid of Encourage Me, I'm Young. I was the kid at 10 years old who couldn't see his dad, who cried, who contemplated suicide, who wanted to run away. I was that kid, 8, 9, and was still doing things responsible, working as a young man, paper route, all of that. But I was that first kid, right? So I understand. This is why we work in that area. I understand. But the parenting, we cannot be at odds at the parenting level. When a child is born, we got to set aside childish things to produce a healthy child together. We can't be about me and you not and we not. There's an essence that go into our children from two parents. That child is going to have a little bit of both. But ignorance, we like to point out that, oh, yeah, that they get that from their daddy or they get that from their mama. And that ain't from this side of the family. All that's got to be cut because we had this child. We got all these kids in what's that, foster care. We got all these kids in foster care. You can't be telling me we went in as parents and we got all these kids in foster care. You know what I mean? That we can't. So to your third point, so we can stay on point, because I will go. Ms. Miller, Heather, Rose, to this point.
So the third key that I would like for us to leave with today, this is about the cost of goods. So if you have a business, you might recognize this term, but I want to present it to you in a different way. The cost of your good to you and to your generations to come, to your children, to your grandchildren. The cost of your good today will translate to the good for your children in their future. So the cost, meaning that there's a price to be paid for our conduct, for our behavior, for our choices. You have to pay that price. The challenge is that when you think that you're getting away or not having to pay the price for something that you said, something that you thought, something that you did, that bill gets transferred to your children. Somebody has to pay that bill. Somebody has to pay that debt. And you are still going to have to pay, whether you do it where you recognize that that's what you're doing or not. This is part of the price that we pay. I talked last week about our frequency and our vibration resonating between 62 and 68 megahertz. That is just your normal state. Your thoughts throughout your day, the words that you use throughout your day, and the actions that you take throughout your day constantly move that frequency up or down. Every word that you speak that's negative, every thought that you have that's negative, every action that you conduct that's negative is going to drop your vibration by negative 12. That means 12 points are lost off of your normal balance state. And if you're a negative person and you find that people don't want to be around you, or that you are only drawing negative people to you, that is the environment. This is the cost of being a negative person. You draw constant negativity to you and to your body and to the environments that you are occupied. You cannot have peace in your house if you don't have peace in your sanctuary, your body. There cannot be peace in your house if you're not peaceful. So if you're not finding peace at home, you need to take a step back and look at the price that you're paying every day. And every day, you are given the opportunity to reset. That's why you go back, you go into a deep sleep, your body starts to heal, because this is what it's designed to do. Your body starts to heal. And when you wake up in the morning, the first word, the first thought, the first action you take is going to either set you up or set you off. And so if you're set off, you understand that because now you're yelling and nothing seems to be going right and you're stubbing your toe. This whole series, this whole chain of events start to take place and you are having a bad day. Mm-hmm. So you can easily reset that. You can pause, you can pray, you can meditate, you can give, you can be grateful in that moment and reset to your 62 to 68 megahertz. So you can recalibrate where you are. This is the cost of the good. This is the cost of goods. You have to do something because you're constantly doing something anyway, but the awareness of what's happening gives you the power to make the difference in how much good you're going to do in a day. So you take that vibration, that energy into the spaces that you occupy. If you're occupying spaces with your children, taking them to places throughout the day, their benefit of having you in their presence is to uplift them. So your thoughts of them, your words that you share with them, and your actions towards them, if you're not giving them and filling them with love energy, if you're not giving them opportunities to be grateful and to show gratitude and understand what that means, good manners, please, thank you, excuse me, hello. These are all areas that you have full control over, that we think are so small and so minute that they don't make a difference. Well, they're making a difference in your internal processes and your chemistry. It's rewiring and reworking your body every day. So if you're having aches and pains, arthritis sets in. When you have calcium deposits from all of the things that you have poured, all the stress that you poured into your body, it starts to build up in your bones and harden your joints. there are things that we can do to help alleviate some of our aches and pains. The first thing is to change your mind. It's a cost, it's a price that you have to pay. Change your words. It's a cost. There's a price that you pay. I am strong. I am not tired. I am not broke. I am not poor. We have to change our words because we break ourselves when we start to repeat that and affirm that. I'm tired. I'm sick and tired. I'm all of those things. You bring that into yourself and you program all the systems in your body to reflect that. You can change that because now you have your children or the people who you say you love in those environments feeling that same expression, feeling the same vibration, your frequency that's either adding to them or taking away from them, because we can stress other people out too. We can stress out our children also. That means their vibrations are fluctuating in unhealthy ways. So we have an opportunity to reset. We have an opportunity every day. Your body is on reset. It starts the process of healing. That's the benefit of being able to have a restful, peaceful night's sleep, to wake up the next day to a reset, to do it again and do it new. You can do it.
Thank you, Heather. Brother Dave.
Yeah, go ahead, you put it down. You put it down. It really is. It comes down. The word tells us that life and death is in the power of the tongue, and so we should speak life on to ourselves as well as so our descendants will benefit from it. So as you mentioned about the variations of activity and what we put into the universe, it's so important that we understand the power of the tongue. What we're saying is definitely, the proverb tells us, "So as a man thinketh, so shall he is." So if we think on a negative level, we pretty much going to act on a negative level. I've come of the nature to date. I was in another group with the VA, and I've come of the nature to date is to realize that most people are on survival mode. What we need to teach them how to thrive in that survival mode, and teach them how to understand who they are from the inside out, not the outside in, and at that point begin to help them to. There's a program called neurolinguistic programming, and it's basically centers in on teaching you how to use language to your advantage. And most of us are not taught that. The language that we pick up, going back to culture, the language we pick up is what we see bombarded through the media, through our environment on an ongoing basis. And they use this out of the positive nature. If you listen to most people's conversation, you will hear more negativity than positive. If we really sat down and thought about all the blessings that God has given us as we wake up every day, or if you want to say your higher power, you would realize that you have more good in your life, especially in America, than you have negative. But again, it's the classic line: the kid comes home with four A's and he has one D. Everybody harps on the D and forget about the four A's of success that he had. But this is what we do within our own interaction with each other. So as you said, Heather, it's so significant. If we're going to bring about a change in our society, our culture, we're going to have to be able to teach how to use the language of spiritual language, emotional language, mental language, to be able to do the check and balance for us to make dramatic change. We are supposed to be change agents. And fathers, back to as Calvin said, as fathers, as the head of the household, we supposed to set that bar. And unfortunately, because again, a simulation of to a way of life that separates the father from the family, it has a devastating impact because we know that a house divided can't stand. So if daddy's over here and mama's over there, there's no unity. And I'll close on this statement that we always say in the Army: community builds and isolation kills. And what we're seeing is such a level of isolation that is killing so much of our well-being as a culture, as a people, and as individuals. It's very hard to come together to solidify the destiny that God has set before us before we even come out of our mother's womb.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Heather. It is startling, to say the least, about the amount of trauma the amount of issues, and I'm just going to run through a few before I drop these solutions, right? I'm going to run through a few, right? Suicide, murder, rape, violence, gun violence, abandonment, CPS, child support, automobiles, drugs, drug selling, juvenile, right? We were studying last night and we came across a startling statistic. Very startling, right? Over 80% of the young men in juvenile come from fatherless homes. 80%. 80%, right? We know the policy is out there, right? But 80%, let's just examine what I just said. 80% of African American boys that are in the juvenile system comes from fatherless homes, right? For the life of me, what is amazing is what we're willing to sacrifice for the individualism, right? I'm somebody. I gotta be, I do my own thing. I don't need no family. Just looking at the words, no snitch. You better not say nothing or I'm going to kill you. These are norms that have been taking place for years in the community. Right? You get drug money and the Fed sees it and you didn't help anybody. You got all this drug money, but you by yourself and the Fed sees it. That was another blow to poverty. You've taken this money from out of the community and given it to the government, right? The Fed sees it. Think about that. I killed you for $40, right? Think about that. Think of the philosophies that has been developed because of dad ain't home. So here's some solutions. Right. One, every household should learn the law. Every parent, every mother, every father, all should understand the law. Not what I heard, but what I actually read. And it should be shared with your family. You should be having family meetings to understand, to navigate, to tell your nieces, nephews, cousins, and all the law. Here's the law. If you trade naked text pictures under the age of 18, they can lock you up and put you literally on that, what's that?
Sex offenders.
Sex offenders list. Right?
And they will.
And they will.
They absolutely will.
Right? Because that sex offenders list needs some color. Point blank.
Youth. It needs youth.
Youth and all of that. Right? So here we go. Across the board. Doesn't matter. Right? You got to remember, you can't do what privilege do. So you got to understand how important it is to make sure that laws are taught consistently. 2, right? Respect. Respect is such a huge, it's a huge thing. Most men's love language is respect. Most people crave a certain amount of respect. So much so that we willing to create another lane for respect, because if you say something and you don't agree, you disrespectful to me, right? Like, so we've created other lanes because we didn't even understand what respect really meant. In 2016, when we kicked off the National Respect Day, we had all those kids open up the phone and read what respect meant. They had all these point of views. My God. When they read it, you could hear a mouse pee on cotton, because that's not what they had in their mind, what respect was. It shifted the whole environment, and they began to see truly what respect is. Respect to save your life. Having respect will save your life. Understanding how to conduct yourself as a person is very important. So that's the number 2 solution. Learn to respect everyone. Learn to respect everyone. Number 3, if you don't have a father, you don't know where your father is. If you know where your father is, you can help 2 people. Just by you, the child, getting to the dad and building a relationship with the dad, you are going to help your father be better, because you will be able to speak up and tell them how you feel. And you're going to help you yourself. The child is going to be that much better. We deny so many children the nutrient of fatherhood. And frankly, watching it is heartbreaking, right? Then when we get into, as we were having these conversations about Big Mama and the old school way of life, the old school is what created the new school, because the old school was abusive. We don't like to admit that. But the philosophy of beating your child instead of teaching your child. Teach your child. Don't beat your child. Teach them. When they fall out the room, you start teaching right away. You don't teach them to hate the other parent. You start teaching them right away. Teaching them the world. Teaching them words and letters, so they have a mindset, right? Because these young kids, these are the indigo kids. These kids are going to do things unbelievable. You already got a 2-year-old reading, talking in full sentences, and already learned 2 languages. These children are going to be amazing. But if you don't teach them, if you don't imply teaching them, you're not going to get out of your child the very best that you want to get out of your child. And again, I raise my hand to be the first to admit I failed my children a number of ways, but thank God I was able to fast and pray and bring them to my feet, and allow me to rekindle a relationship that so many people wanted to destroy between me and my children. They wanted me to leave this world without my children loving me. So many people. Society, me not even talking about family, society wanted me to fail as a father. Period. That's not going to happen. I'll fail at everything else but fatherhood. And I take that back, because I ain't failing at nothing. God has made sure that I must continue to do the work and the walk, and I will. And I stand by that. So with that being said, those 3 things are the 3 things that I suggest for all. I thank you, Heather and Dave, for always articulating your answers and your solutions as this podcast is building. And we're going to take it up. We're going to get Crystal in here next week. Then we're going to continue to take this thing up to another level where nothing but solutions is coming out of here. What's your story? And then hear how you're solving it. That's what we're going to do. But in the meantime, I want to say shout out to Paul Posey in Georgia, who's been on, and shout out to Colleen Whitaker and William Allen and my brother Dewan for listening in. But I want to say this: if you do not understand how important family is, just pick up a book. When you pick up the book and you read an introduction, or you read, I dedicate this story to who? It's to family. I dedicate this story to my children for allowing me to. When you pick up a book and you open that book up, the dedication is usually to family. Isn't that amazing? Right? When you understand the words of the various people when you get into Dr. Miles Monroe, when you get into all of these great speakers, when you open up their books, it's about family before they even get into the gift that God gave them. Your first ministry, dad, mom, is to family. I just want you to take that time to understand that we're going to paint this picture. We're going to push it and push it until the whole world understands it's about family. My name is Kelvin Mann. God bless you. This has been METV. Encourage me. I'm young. Peace.